Alrighty people, we know that New York Attorney General Letitia James is corrupt, that she's brazen in her corruption. The only question is she actually stupid enough to follow through on the seizure of Trump assets to execute that ridiculous judgment pending appeal? Time will tell, but she's taken the first step towards that process, and she's registered the judgment as a lien against Trump properties. Vive, Frei, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida rumbler. My kid is at a birthday party at a Chuck E. Cheese, so I have retired to the office to make this video because it's amazing. It's wild. Letitia James, we all know she's corrupt. We all know that she's brazen in her corruption. The only question is she actually stupid enough to follow through on her prior threat to actually seize Trump properties so as to execute this ridiculous $455 million judgment that she got through corrupt New York nipple judge Engoron against Trump for an alleged fraud in which there was no victim, no complainant, no loss, no nothing except for a corrupt attorney general who campaigned off prosecuting Trump and followed through on that threat. All right, she's taken the first step towards actually following through on her second threat of seizing properties to satisfy that judgment. She has registered nipple judge Engoron's judgment against some of Trump properties. This is coming from an article called Vlawg? No, it's a publication in a journal called Vlawg. Westchester. Attorney General James files judgment in Westchester placing liens on Trump properties in fraud action by David McKay Wilson. Published 3:02 a.m. Eastern Time, March 23rd, 2024. That's yesterday. Now, this sounds kind of scary because it is when you register liens against properties, it basically encumbers those properties. You can basically never sell those properties until the lien is removed, or when you sell the property, the proceeds of the sale have to go to the person who's registered the lien. So Attorney General Letitia James has actually registered the judgments, which acts as a lien against the property. So Trump is basically prevented from selling those properties, but it's also the first step towards seizing those properties in satisfaction of the judgment, notwithstanding the fact that that ridiculous judgment is the object of an appeal right now. Moving on with the article. As Donald Trump eyes a Monday deadline to post an appeal bond in his civil fraud case, State Attorney General Letitia James has registered the judgment with the Westchester County Clerk, setting up the framework for James to seize Trump properties in Westchester if she decides to do so. Two of Trump's iconic properties, the Seven Springs Mansion Estate and Trump National Golf Course, are among James' possible targets. Corrupt, brazen, and I will use the other C word, communist. A person who has never built anything of value in her entire life comes in and says, I like what you have. I'm going to find a criminal. And I'm saying criminal because I think this is criminal corruption. I'm going to find a criminally corrupt way of seizing your assets. We are going to file a civil fraud suit against you, even though there is no fraud, no complainant. Nobody is complaining. In fact, the banks are only complaining now that they can no longer lend to Donald Trump. We're going to fabricate a civil fraud suit and then go in front of a corrupt judge, get a ridiculous, outlandish order of nearly $500 million, $360 million in disgorgement of alleged ill-gotten gains when nobody has complained, plus what it was at $100 million in interest. At one point, Letitia James, nothing corrupt about this, was tweeting out the daily interest of about $115,000 on the award. Nothing crazy, nothing ridiculous about this. Get the hell out of New York, people. Everybody get the hell out of New York. Someone who has never built anything of value in her life is now taking things of value from other people. And would you just look at one of those properties? Donald Trump's Seven Springs estate in North Castle has 60 rooms, 15 bedrooms, and an indoor swimming pool made of marble. Like every good communist, Letitia James looked at Donald Trump and said, find me the man, I will show you the crime, and I like what he's got. How do I get that for myself? Oh, and for the fact checkers, I don't mean for myself personally, as in Letitia James personally is going to go take his property, but as Attorney General, she campaigned off prosecuting Trump. She prosecuted Trump. She found a corrupt judge to get judgment against Trump. And now if it means destroying the entire state of New York, she's going to seize his assets and make an example out of him. So the lien is not a seizure of property. It's not a sale under judicial authority, but it's the first step in doing so. And it's Monday tomorrow, as at the time of shooting this vlog. We'll see if Letitia James is not just brazen, not just corrupt, but stupid enough to follow through on the interim seizure and sale of the assets, despite the pending appeal. If she does it, it will kill business in New York even more than it already has. But it's not just the brazenness, the corruption, the sheer stupidity of all of this. It's the hypocrisy. For those of you who don't know, there was an article in the New York Post written by a journalist named Miranda Devine, who might be on the channel sooner than later, about a situation in which Letitia James intervened that smells a lot like this situation, the Donald Trump alleged civil fraud case, except in this case, which involves an American Irish Historical Society, a building in New York, actual fraudulent overvaluation of an asset for the purposes of fraudulently soliciting a loan. It involves actual fraud and an actual victim. Letitia James intervened in this particular case to deny the victim of the fraud the ability to recoup his loan to this Irish society, which was actually based based on actual fraud. Let's just read a bit of this article. It doesn't show outright corruption of Letitia James yet, although there's a bit of an asterisk or a parenthesis to that. It just shows the outright political prosecution, the selective prosecution, the political corruption that is Letitia James. Here's a press release from Letitia James, the New York State Attorney General. Attorney General James announces plan to preserve and revitalize the American Irish Historical Society, December 19, 2022. Well, my goodness, doesn't that ever sound noble? Letitia James thinking of the Irish children. You've got to preserve the building for the sake of the children. When you read a bit more about the actual story here, you realize that Letitia James is politically corrupt to the core. If she didn't have double standards, she'd have no standards at all. She has weaponized the civil fraud prosecution against Donald Trump while systematically ignoring it in this particular case for reasons which itself might be somewhat corrupt. From the New York Post, Miranda Devine, An Irish Society, An Unpaid Loan, and the Hypocrisy of Letitia James, published March 17, 2024. To celebrate St. Patrick's Day, here is a tale of financial shenanigans at the American Irish Historical Society in which Trump-deranged New York Attorney General Letitia James is hoisted by her own petard. It involves a grand old building on Fifth Avenue, an unpaid loan, a fading family dynasty, a James Joyce theatrical production which almost ended in fisticuffs, and hypocrisy from the AG as obvious as a glass of green beer. Now, there are a lot of details in the article that relate to the actual lawsuit itself. We can gloss over those. I'm going to have, hopefully, Miranda Devine on the channel sooner than later. But the bottom line of this entire tale is that the American Irish Historical Society ran into some problems. They needed liquidity in order to continue their operations. They're a charity, by the way. So they solicited a $3 million loan from a member of the board named Doyle, who loaned $3 million on the basis that the building that is the American Irish Historical Society building, this beautiful building, was worth allegedly $80 million because of the airspace above the building. So on the basis of these warranties and representations, that being the value of the building, this guy Doyle decided to loan $3 million to the American Irish Historical Society. His loan would be well secured because the building was worth well more than the loan, yada, yada, yada. Bottom line, it turns out that the building was fraudulently overvalued, that apparently it didn't have any value of the airspace above it, that it wasn't worth $80 million, that it probably wasn't even worth $40 million, that it was probably more worth like $20 million, setting aside actual fraudulent overvaluation of an asset for the purposes of fraudulently soliciting a loan from an individual. Doyle loaned $3 million, and when he wasn't paid back for his loan, he tried to foreclose on the property, force its sale so that he could get paid back his $3 million from the proceeds. And what happens? Attorney General Letitia James gets involved and decides to kibosh the possible sale of the building. Why? She's got to do it for the Irish people. And what could be the possible basis for Attorney General Letitia James to get involved and block the sale of a property so that Doyle could recoup his $3 million loss? She says, and maybe rightly so, that it's a charity and therefore any sale of assets needs to be approved by the Office of the Attorney General. And she got involved and said, no, we're not going to sell it because it's going to be bad for American Irish people. She's going to get involved for the sake of all Irish people. She's going to say, I am getting involved and not allowing this sale to go through. And by the way, Doyle, that $3 million loan you had, which you secured with a mortgage on the property, oh yeah, it's invalid because you were a board member and you couldn't make such a loan or secure it with a mortgage. So unlike the Trump case, here we have actual fraudulent overvaluation, an actual victim of the fraud who tries to execute on his loan. What the heck is that? There's a guy with no helmet on a CC motorcycle. Doesn't matter. You have an actual victim of the fraud trying to reclaim his loan, trying to recoup his loan, and the Office of the Attorney General gets involved and says, no, I'm blocking the sale, and we're going to get involved with the management of this. And now Doyle has sued and subpoenaed Letitia James to see if she might have any connections to the American Irish Historical Society, if she's taken any loans, if she's hosted any events there. And I suspect if Doyle is asking for this by way of subpoena, it might be because he might know a little more than the average person because he was actually on the board. It doesn't matter. She's a hypocrite. That's the bottom line of all of this. She announced that by state law, any sale of a nonprofit asset had to be approved by her, effectively kiboshing the plan. Quote, it's an amazing place, end quote, James gushed to the Irish Voice. Quote, we had to save it, had to save it. One day people can come in there and enjoy it again, end quote. Which is all very well, but Doyle still was owed $3 million. The AG appointed an interim board of directors, and Doyle was persuaded not to try to collect his money or foreclose on the mortgage before July 2023. But by August 2023, he still hadn't been repaid, so he initiated foreclosure proceedings and promptly was blocked by the AG, who claimed the mortgage was invalid because he was a board member. On Friday, Doyle launched a lawsuit against the society and requested a subpoena be issued against James, requiring her to produce a raft of documents, including anything related to campaign events hosted at the townhouse or any contributions to her political campaigns from the society or any of its members or directors. Given that I know that Letitia James is corrupt to the core, I'm going to presume that the odor of mendacity, the odor of her corruption, also infiltrates this particular situation here. She is just an outright hypocrite. Political prosecution, political persecution against Donald Trump, where there was actually no fraud, no victim, and no complainant. And she goes as hard in the paint as you possibly can in that case. And in this case, where you have an actual victim, Doyle, an actual fraudulent overvaluation of the building, 80 million to 40 million to probably closer to 20 million. And you have the Attorney General intervene and prevent the individual from actually foreclosing on his loan. You have Letitia James looking at the actual victim of fraud and saying, no, you don't get to execute against your loan. And moreover, your loan is invalid because you were a board member. And so kiss your $3 million goodbye. And I like that building. And I like the status that's going to come with me allegedly saving that building, even if it means denying you the $3 million that you loaned. Anyhow, so it's not actual fraud that we know of just yet, although I suspect we might find some sinister, corrupt motivations as to why she got involved, as to why she decided that she's going to deny this man his justice. But the bottom line, there is no standard here. There is only politically motivated prosecution, a weaponization of the entire legal system, lawfare, communist lawfare, and you got your New York nipple judge Engeron going along with it, and now you have Letitia James and the court basically saying, there's nothing we can do, Donald Trump, to not proceed with the sale of your properties in execution of this judgment, because that's the judgment, and the court doesn't have the power to stay or alter the terms of any sort of interim bond, interim remedy. It is absolute rubbish. Trump filed an appeal of Engeron's decision, and he filed a motion to stay the order pending the appeal on the basis that it's a practical impossibility for anyone to find $500 million to post in court pending the appeal of this decision, that it's an impossibility to get a bond to secure this judgment because the bond apparently required $1 billion in liquid assets, and Trump might be worth several $1 billion, but nobody's sitting around with billions of dollars in cash in a bank account. They'd have to be stupid to do that and not use that money, leverage that money to make more money. So you have Letitia James and Engeron saying, nothing we can do, go to the Court of Appeal and they'll preserve your rights pending appeal, but in the meantime, we're going to register liens against your properties, and if Letitia James is truly stupid, above and beyond being brazen and corrupt, she will actually seize these assets, sell them for a fraction of their worth, fire sale, judicial sale, just to satisfy this court order. And if they do that, but in the meantime, they're trying to bankrupt him. They are trying to interfere with the elections. This is what I call lawfare election interference. We are seeing it in real time. Some people are hypothesizing that the amount of the award, $454 million, ironically, coincidentally matched what Trump happened to have in his coffers for his election campaign. Might be a coincidence, might not be a coincidence, but one way or another, this is election interference, and it's coming from the Attorney General and this judge, Engeron, that have enabled this election interference. And one day, maybe there will be some justice on appeal, but I'm not holding my breath for that. The justice has to come from the Supreme Court down, and then from the bottom up to vote these people out of office, to impeach them, to disbar them, that there should be some political and ethical sanctions for what they've done, because they have compromised the entire system. And I don't know how long it's going to take New York to recover from this, but my goodness, New York is going to suffer for this. We are going to be talking about this tonight, as at the time of shooting this vlog, 6 o'clock with Robert Barnes, Vive and Barnes Sunday Night Law Extravaganza. If you like what I do, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Vive Frei on Rumble, the Vive Frei on Twitter, vivabarneslaw.locals.com on Locals, where our entire community is above average. But most importantly, get out there, exercise, eat healthy, and now you know your vlog. Peace out, peeps. Booyah!